Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It was so eloquently stated that being a woman in the engineering world, takes a little bit of guts. And I'm a social scientist in the engineering world and also a woman, so I am the minority here today. But as was so eloquently stated as well, that there's a human factor in the industry, there's a human factor to the effect of infrastructure development. That's where my focus lies, in critical spatial interpretation of human inhabitation. The global question of sustainability and environmental resilience requires a universal platform for the establishment of environmental management frameworks, as well as targets for land oceans which require protection, and a universal set of indicators for natural resources. This is encompassed by the Millennium Development Goals and expanded in the Sustainable Development Goals, which create an opportunity for global collaboration. The MDGs and SDGs are not legally binding agreements, however. They represent a global, moral, practical, and ethical commitment. This commitment cannot be enforced, but requires global cooperation between the private sector, as well as governments and local international investors. The MDGs established measurable and time-bound objectives for the promotion of worldwide awareness and accountability, as well as the creation of improved metrics and opportunities for social feedback. The MDGs, however, could be attempted and attained in relative isolation, with each country focusing on the targets which characterizes the variability between developed and developing countries in and of themselves. The SDGs provide a platform for the secure progress of the achievement of targets with a global collaboration in terms of strategy, policy, data collection, interpretation, and implementation, thus eliminating this isolation of the MDGs. The MDGs emphasize the basic human rights of health, education, shelter, and security, and were designed to alleviate extreme poverty by the target date of 2015. The MDG aim to advance human well-being necessarily needs to be fulfilled within the ecological limits of the biosphere, however, and the overall achievements of the MDGs and SDGs may thus be interpreted against a metric of MDG Goal 7, ensuring the environmental sustainability, because global environmental sustainability is necessary and sufficient condition for human well-being. The SDGs embody the MDGs and expand upon the implementation of interventions to eradicate poverty and hunger, as well as inequality, and ensuring inter alia food security and improved nutrition, as well as health, equitable education, gender equality, availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation, access to energy, economic growth, sustainable ecosystems, and sustainable consumption. While MDG Goal 7 focused on environmental sustainability and yielded measurable outcomes, the SDGs comprise a more holistic, sustainable approach, namely clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, and life on land. The enhancement of human well-being is encompassed in the aforementioned goals, inasmuch as human dignity and quality of life are dependent upon water and sanitation services, and private and public economic development require affordable and safe power. The aforementioned 7 goals affect the global population in both developed and developing countries, and thus form a global platform for reform. The SDGs present an opportunity for global engagement because of the potential for mobilization of global knowledge. The global community of practice in terms of research and innovation may be able to collaborate in global problem-solving networks related to sustainable development, of energy, food, urbanization, climate resilience, disaster management, and vulnerability mitigation. Global collaboration in the achievement of the SDGs does not fall solely within the scope of research development, though, but also in terms of public investments in infrastructure and technology in order to empower low-income countries to organize human activity to combine living standards and ecological imperatives. This organization is imperative in terms of the resource intensity in the production of goods and services, consumption of goods and services per person, and population size. When these factors are addressed within a sustainable context, it becomes possible to investigate opportunities for the establishment of social inclusion in world economies. The potential development, therefore, depends on the global collaboration of communities of practice to use the data gathered from the MDG initiative in order to establish a framework for global environmental resilience, which may be broken down to community-level interventions around the world through the implementation of municipal environmental management frameworks, as well as local, national, and international target for land oceans which require protection, and a universal set of indicators for natural resources. The SDGs thus have a global effect in terms of economic development, environmental sustainability, and a different approach to governance in order to enhance human well-being by 2030. Global commitment to fulfill the SDGs in a collaborative manner may alleviate the man-made stress that has been placed on the global ecosystem in order to reduce the risk of exceeding the planetary thresholds which sustain life on Earth. Sustainability and human well-being are not mutually exclusive, and the interdisciplinary collaborative efforts of the subject matter experts may create the foundation for the achievement of the SDGs. An example of collaboration in the attempt to achieve SDG 6 is evidenced by the Zambian Western Water and Sewerage Company commissioning a South African civil engineering firm, SMEC South Africa, in order to mitigate the vulnerability of 10 towns in the western province of Zambia with regard to water supply and sanitation services. The subject matter expertise applied to the aforementioned project comprised a socio-spatial investigation into the water poverty of the affected area in order to contextualize the vulnerability of the inhabitants as well as the environment of the affected area. This underpinned the engineering design process with regard to the design of the bulk water supply, abstraction points, the water distribution network, raw water treatment, and sanitation services. One of the 10 towns of the Western Province was identified, namely Namushikende, and this was used as a case study in a previous journal article and conference presentation. Namushikende falls within the Mongu district of the Western Province of Zambia. The Mongu district is predominantly rural, with commercial and subsistence activities mainly comprising of farming, fishing, timber exploitation, crafts, livestock production, and trading. Namushikende falls under the influence of the Barotse Royal Establishment because of its location in relation to the Barotse floodplain or the Zambezi floodplain. The housing units available in the district are inadequate, hence the development of informal or unplanned settlements and illegal structures in formal settlements. As Namushikende falls within the ambit of rural Mongu, the health risks to the residents include malaria, HIV and AIDS, and environmentally related diseases, including waterborne diseases. Malnutrition is also one of the highest reported causes of morbidity. A basic standard of health is directly related to a community's access to water and sanitation services, as the community is vulnerable in terms of hazard exposure due to untreated water and lack of sufficient water supply to the town. It is important to note that Namushikende has very limited access to treated and safe water, which is why people in the area experience high incidences of disease. Namushikende was thus found to be vulnerable due to its location in terms of accessibility because it is not feasible for the inhabitants to source water directly from the river, from the Zambezi River. Furthermore, the lack of treated water increases the vulnerability of inhabitants of the town as the health risks associated with excreta-related diseases increases. The current bulk water supply of the town was built in 1974. The system has since been abandoned because water from the plains is seasonal and thus not a reliable supply source. The seasonality of the water supply source from the floodplains renders Namushikende vulnerable to natural disasters as well, including droughts and floods. Currently, water is sourced from a well field located at the old intake, which is on the western part of the town along the banks of the Barotse floodplain. 2 boreholes are available, but only one is equipped for use for the entire town. The well field has been encroached upon by squatters, which raises the concern regarding water quality and reaffirms the inhabitants' vulnerability in terms of quality, as the water only undergoes rudimentary treatment through manual chlorination. This is a dangerous and unreliable treatment method, as the operator has to climb into the tank to access the ladder on a daily basis, and there is no protection against water source contamination. Without automated chlorination, there is inconsistent levels of disinfection that could result in health risks where underchlorination or overchlorination is present. And furthermore, the concentrated chlorine in the elevated tanks may corrode the steel, which creates infrastructure vulnerability as well as environmental degradation. Namushikende also has no access to wastewater treatment, and the sanitation services are predominantly comprised of on-site systems. SMEC South Africa thus used the Water Poverty Index in order to indicate the measures of access, water quality, water uses, capacity, and environmental aspects in order to design a new water and sanitation system for the town, as well as the other 10 towns in Zambia. Which comprised the construction of new additional boreholes to improve access to water through improving quality and quality, the implementation of automatic chlorination, the rehabilitation of water storage systems, the construction of reservoirs, improving the amount of accessible water, the sustainable development of the water supply in order to improve the development of agriculture and for productive purposes, leading to the improved socioeconomic status of the residents, consistent, clean water through water treatment and improved infrastructure to improve the iron content of the water, the protection and the supervision of the well field, and the provision of new VIPs, pore flush systems, and aqua privy systems, septic tanks, and soakaways to improve the wastewater treatment. The pervading issue of water supply and sanitation services as applied to SDG 6, as well as the potential environmental impact of the lack of access, requires collaborative interventions in order to address the well-being of communities in areas where the lack of access to resources threatens the quality of life as well as the environments in which individuals live. Sustainable development of resources is attainable through interdisciplinary approaches, as exemplified by the collaboration of SMEC South Africa and WWSC, where social sciences and engineering were used in conjunction in order to identify the vulnerability of a community to mitigate the vulnerability. Thank you very much.